Welcome to Gonzaga Nation and a special edition of the Coaches Show. Head coach now of the Eastern Washington Eagles. He started Gonzaga off on this tremendous run over 20 years ago. Dan Monson. Coach, thanks for joining.
I appreciate the 20 because I think it's been closer to 25. So it's been a while. We all know that, but it's great to be back.
Yeah, well, you're a big part of my story of getting to Gonzaga and really propelling my career forward, and I'm sure we'll touch on it at some point, but I want this to be more about your story, your time at Gonzaga, your coaching career, your coaching path, and now coming full circle back into the inland Northwest. Give us a really quick summary of the pull and the allure of getting back here and being at Eastern Washington after all these years.
Well, it's interesting you say that about your path and my path, because I think that's the unique thing about Gonzaga Nation or the Gonzaga family is it all is intertwined. And you being the last recruit that I recruited and didn't coach at Gonzaga, it just shows just how circular this whole thing is as a community, as a program. And for me personally, I was actually, my dad was the head basketball coach at Cheney High School. I was born at Sacred Heart, and remember, the first day I go out to interview for the job, I missed the turn and ended up a block away from campus at a little park that just, I would have never remembered, but it just clicked back to me as a little kid running around there. My dad was the arts and crafts park guy for the summer that's making extra money, and I was able to run around that park, and it just a memory that I don't know if I was 5, 6 years old, but memory that I would have never recalled, but it was just a deja vu, and it just kind of shows how it all came back around, and to come back, there's so much different now 25 years later in Spokane, and yet so many things the same, and so many of the people have gone or left, and so many people have stayed. It's just it's a lot of emotions and memories, and the way my career ended at Long Beach State, it's just been a real surreal 5-6 weeks.
Well, let's go back there and talk about that. When I followed and tracked the story, obviously you got let go, but then they asked you to coach. That had to have been a weird dynamic. What was that conversation like? And the players must have loved playing for you and respected you because they gave you a hell of an effort in the Big West tournament and then also in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, it didn't come as a surprise. We had an athletic director change 3 years ago, and they did an interim for a year. They had an AD 3 years ago, and then an interim 2 years ago, and then this year a new AD, and they let my contract go out for that reason. And so I knew my contract was out, and we probably need to win the league or generate some enthusiasm by getting to the NCAA tournament, something for it not to happen. And we'd struggled at the end of the year, so I actually asked for the meeting and said, can we talk about exit plan, or after 17 years, how we want to play this. And I told them in the meeting that if we don't win this tournament, I think the place probably needs a new voice, and I need a new challenge and a new something kind of new for me at my age. And they said that was great, but they were going to make that change today. And that was the only part I disagreed with. I just said, and especially at a mid-major, this week is our season, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to quit on my guys. We've been working for all year for this week, and this week is what it's all about. And they said, well, no, we want you to coach this week, but there's definitely we want to make a change. So it was, and with that being said, I wouldn't trade that for anything in my career. It was the best week, 2 weeks of my career, because as you said, when something like that happens, you get to see a whole different aspect of your family, of your friends, the support. That my kids, the pride they had in the situation, and to go through it. I had one of my sons coaching with me and one of them playing for me, and And just I wouldn't have traded those moments and as you said, the all of a sudden, the players crying, and showing how much they loved you because they're like your own kids,
Yeah.
until you discipline them, until you're pushing them and all that, you don't really know if they know that you love them and until they tell you. And that was a day that I'll never forget because every player, told me how much they loved me. And as you said, then they went out the next week and showed it the next 2 weeks.
And you guys had a matchup against Arizona, power in the West. Tommy Lloyd, their head coach, also has Gonzaga ties. Did you hire Tommy to come as a student assistant, volunteer assistant, or Coach Few? Because I've heard conflicting stories over the years.
The story is that Jeff Rhineland, the coach at Walla Walla Community College, a mentor of Tommy's, and his mother and my mother grew up together in Pomeroy, Washington, and so that was our connect, and that helped me get Jeremy Eaton here out of Walla Walla Community College, and so I had a little tie with him, and so he called in a family favor and said, "Hey, I've got this guy, and he's coaching overseas. I mean, he's playing overseas. He wants to come back and get into coaching. Can he be a GA for you?" And I'd never met Tommy, and I just knew of the family. And for Jeff Rhineland, I did that and said, "Yeah, he can be a GA here. We don't pay anything, but he can get his foot in the door and that sort of thing." So when I took the job from Minnesota, Mark gets a little fuzzy because he was like, we're both like scrambling, because, here I'm going to go take this job at Minnesota, and all of a sudden he's going to be a head coach for the first time. So, it was emotional, and we were just, and sitting like this before I left, I said, "Hey, a couple things." I said, I don't have room for Scott Snyder, on my staff. You need to take care of him here. And he said, "Sure, no problem." I believe it was Kyle Bankhead I'd promised a walk-on spot to, if I remember right. And then the third thing was I have this GA that I promised a GA situation for, Tommy Lloyd. And Fury's like, yeah, no problem,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we're changing jobs. So then about 2 weeks later, we call and we're on the phone, and he's like, "Oh," I'm like, "What have I done? This is a mess here." And he's like, "Oh my God, being a head coach, I'm scrambling." We're just commiserating over it and stuff. And all of a sudden he says, "Hey, and I got this Tommy guy that's been hanging out at practice. And so what did you tell him again? What are we supposed to be doing with this guy?" And so that Tommy guy ended up to being pretty vital to this whole
Yeah.
family and connection. So
Well, Tommy was my guy my redshirt year. We worked diligently every single day because I couldn't travel and he wasn't traveling. So great hire on your part. Great
and
job by
great
Coach
last
Few.
recruited by me too. So,
Yep.
I did a couple things to get the Zags going.
Absolutely. So you're a huge part of the foundation of the fabric. When you talked about going back to Eastern Washington and you kind of drove to a park, brought back a lot of memories because your dad was a head coach at Cheney High School. You had some pretty big coaching influences. Your dad was a tremendous coach. I remember him at Oregon at the Pit and Judd Heathcote. Would you consider those two your biggest coaching influences?
I would say Fitz is my biggest coaching influence. I think I learned what it is to be a coach from those two, because with them, I really was more off the court with my dad, obviously, and Coach Heathcote, and I was, living, I mean, you're see how they live and breathe the game and just how much more there is into coaching than just the X's and O's and dealing with your staffs and dealing with players and dealing with, things, grades and things that they bring home at night that they're, worried about that isn't basketball related. So I really learned how, that coaching is not as glamorous and as cut and dry. I mean, everybody thinks they can know how to coach, and there's a lot to it. And my dad and Coach Heathcote really, were old school and really showed me a lot of the commitment and the energy and the work that it took to be a good coach. But I learned the X's and O's in the game from Fitz because, we really, with my dad, we wouldn't like get in the trenches and talk about, the 2-3 matchup zone a lot. I'd obviously go to their practices and understand what their motives were in practice and how they were trying to run things, excuse me. But with Fitz, it was really the, putting in your offense, putting in your defense, your presses, out of bounds plays, all the coaching X's and O's. He really was instrumental to me for those things.
So you mentioned the impact of Fitz, and I know he had an impact on Billy Greer, Mark Few. You guys had a young group of assistant coaches that kind of came up together, and from my understanding, a lot of it came from working University of Oregon camps when your dad was the head coach there. I think Mark Turgeon was another coach, Leon Rice. How fun was that time for you guys as young coaches to just throw ideas out there and talk hoops and then support each other all these years later, because each one of you guys have become really good head coaches at your own places.
Yeah, Mark Turgeon and Tad Boyle followed my dad with Jerry Green to Oregon, so they were kind of on the tail end of it. But yeah, that group, it was interesting because we did. We lived the game together and lived life together. I mean, Mark would always call it a perfect day was a trifecta when we'd get we'd play some hoops and we'd go play some tennis and we'd go for a run or whatever, try to get 3 different activities in a day. But Mark and I and Billy lived together for probably about 8 to 10 years, as assistants. And then when Mark got married, and again, we all got in it for the right reasons. Nobody was making any money. Nobody was, there was no glamour to this at all. We just loved basketball, and my dad gave me kind of autonomy to that camp. When I first got here, I was still running his camps because I had a computer science minor. It was just kind of a joke back then, but I could actually put the schedule on a computer. Everybody thought that was really cool, and so I was also hired, young people my age that I knew, and so Mark was an assistant, I think, at Cresswell High School, and Billy was at Pleasant Valley, I don't know what one of those small high schools there, and and we all started working those camps. Leon was a GA for my dad at that time at Oregon, and Mike Peterson was another one who was a women's coach here, who actually really was instrumental in getting me to Gonzaga because of those camps. We had a relationship, and he was a head women's coach when I got on my first assistant's job. So it really was entangled. But I think the thing that was the biggest thing is how we couldn't afford, like when Mark, I turned the job down a couple of times. He says it's $500 for the year. It was $500 a month. But and I said finally, well, if you live for free with me, could you do it? And so that just started. And then Billy, we made him be Felix Unger, and he had to cook and clean for his. but and it went so far as, when Mark got married and he was still an assistant, he couldn't afford a house or anything. So Mark and Marcy and I lived together for a year while they got enough money for a down payment on a house. So, and Mark's dad married all of us, and we were in each other's weddings. So it's deeper than the coaching. It's just we lived the game together and we lived life together.
So you get let go from Long Beach State. Obviously, you've got the support of those friends that are in the coaching world. What was the determining factor for you to say, I want to stay in this, I want to give it a shot at Eastern Washington? And how did they support you in that process? Phone calls to the AD, helping you understand the lay of the land in the Big Sky, because you'd spent 17 years in the Big West.
Yeah. It was interesting because, again, the contract's running out, and you're retirement had crossed your mind, but I didn't feel like I was ready. And I was having so much fun with my son playing and coaching with one of my kids, and we were having a good year overall. I mean, in the preseason, I think we're the only school in the country to have a true road win at a Big Ten school, a Pac-10 school, and a Pac-12 school, and a Big East school. We won at DePaul, we won at USC, and we won at Michigan. So we had a good team and a good year. So it just, I was taught, and I've gone in to contemplate, because it was the contractors run out of stepping away, but I wasn't sure and I wasn't ready. So when somebody else tells you what you're doing, it changes. And I'm like, no. it gave me time to reflect. I'm like, I still want to do this, and so but as I said, in that time, it was really cool to see Mark and one of the I got hundreds of texts, and I say that just a context, but it was really overwhelming of how much support I got through those couple of weeks. And one of the most memorable, meaningful ones was Marcy was videoing the last 30 seconds of our conference tournament game with her kids and Mark in their living room, yelling at the TV and coaching the last 30 seconds of it. And my nephew Mac Graff, who was a manager for Gonzaga there, and just seeing how invested everybody was for me and for my family and for the success of our run. And that support, jobs will come and go, but family and friends, to elevate your feelings and be able to openly say those things to each other and care about each other like that was more meaningful than any job.
You also have stayed in touch with a number of players from your time at Gonzaga, and a lot of those guys have come back and made their families' lives here in Spokane. Now you've come back to Spokane. How many former players have reached out to you, tried to help you, support you in your new role, get you acclimated to the Spokane Cheney area again?
It's been great. I heard right away from, I think, Matt Santangelo and Q from Quentin.
Yeah.
Of course, he wants to come back and to the area, and I heard it from him from the Bahamas and Richie Fromm right away, and you and I always keep in touch text wise, but what really was the epitome is I said there's something wrong with my life right now. I'm 62 years old, living with my parents, with my son in the same, sharing the same bed right now. It's when you talk about things going full circle, they've really gone full circle. And I got a daughter that's a senior at Gonzaga on the crew team, so they had a regatta Saturday in Portland, and so I met my wife there, and we got to connect for a day and catch up, and it was really great. But we had to get up about 4 a.m. because there was no hotels in Eugene at our spring game, and we're in Salem. So we drive it, long day. I get back to my parents. They live in a condominium complex downtown. And my phone is lighting up with Jeff Brown, and he's 2 floors up, and it's like 8:30, and I'm like, hey, I just landed. I'm going to bed. I'll catch up later. And he's like, no. We're going to connect tonight. I'm in the same building. I'm like, no, I'm going. And he's like, you're 60, not 80, And I said, well, I'm living with 91-year-olds. I got the same body clock as they do. But he rousted me out, and it really hit like, I'm really home, and I've got, these former players and friends. And, last night, McGuire, my oldest, and I, got to go to the Few House and watch the Laker game and have dinner together and catch up. And, B. Mike and Mark have been my lead, sources of, trying to recruit and figure out our roster. And it's just, it's great to be home. It is, it's home. It's not the same as it was when I was here 25 years ago, but it's where I started, and it's where I'm probably going to finish.
So you said it's not the same. Big picture wise, we had Mike Roth in last week, and we talked on a number of different things, and he talked about kind of that time frame where Dan Fitzgerald handed the keys to you, and Coach Few was a young assistant, Mike Roth was a young athletic director, and you guys kind of had these visions of doing things differently and not saying no, and competing with the quote elites on the West Coast at that time. Okay. Could you have imagined from those early meetings Gonzaga becoming what it is now? I mean, what's it like to see it?
People say that, that, and I don't claim to be the smartest one. I'm not even the smartest one in these 2 chairs, so I'm not the smartest guy in the world. But when people ask me that, I kind of laugh and say, if I would have thought that it was going to be like, do you think I would have been dumb enough to leave? I would have just given Mark the job and say, hey, you got it. It's going to be 25 straight years of the NCAA tournament. It's going to be no problem. I mean, at that time, and people were like, why did you? At that time, I turned it down twice, but they just kept the money coming up, and they kept the resources. I said it's too far away from my family, and they put a family and travel budget in for me to fly my families back and forth, and hotels and stuff for my family. They just took every excuse out of doing it. And the fact of the matter is, Gonzaga wasn't ready yet, and it was going to take me 15 years to make as much here. And I was going to start, it was irresponsible not to take it, because I was getting married in 2 weeks and wanted to start a family. And it's going to take me 15 years to make as much as 2 years here. The simple math, your life's not going to be that long, and you got to look at it that way. And the other thing that at that point, everybody in the WCC had a run, and having a run is special, and a lot of, and it's really hard to do. And I'm really proud to say we had that run, and it was the start of something great. But to sustain it, what Mark has done and what Mike Roth did to sustain it, nobody else in the country has ever done what they've done. I mean, at that point, Santa Clara had a run with Steve Nash, and it upset Arizona in the tournament, and they had a run, but then it was over. And Loyola Marymount had a run with Bo Kimball and Hank Gathers, and it was a special run, like our Elite Eight run. But once those two guys were gone, it was over. And Doug Christie and Pepperdine had a great run. They just marched through the WCC for like 3 years in a row, went undefeated. And then once that hit and Asbury went to Kansas State, it was over. So, history and just common sense would say, it's going to be, to sustain it at Gonzaga is not practical. You have to be realistic here, and that's what I was at that point. And then, and I you say who had that vision? I certainly didn't, but Mark Few did. Mark was always the one that was pushing the envelope, saying, we need, we can, kids shouldn't be going to Washington State. They should be coming here, and at that point in time, it was unheard of that a kid would choose Gonzaga over that. And people like you and Jeff Brown and Eric Brady transferring back here gave this place the validity to be able to do that. So it was timing, but it was also great timing that a visionary like Mark and Mike Roth took over at the helm too.
So to see how players could fit into what was becoming Gonzaga, and then you go to Minnesota and you see it at the Big Ten Power 5 level, and then you've been in the Big West at Long Beach State. How are you going to have to kind of change your eye for recruiting and evaluating, especially considering the new landscape of NIL for Eastern Washington?
Yeah, and I think that's a mark of coaching. When I was here at Gonzaga, our recruiting scheme and was really, we knew we weren't going to get the best athletes, so we needed to have the best skilled players, and we felt like if we could get guys open, they could make shots, and Gonzaga did that for years and years, and that was kind of because they couldn't recruit the athletes that other schools would have, and they didn't try to. They recruited the mind and the skill set, and guys that had great heart and great intelligence of the game. And when I went to Minnesota, Clem Haskins' philosophy was totally different. He had great athletes, and it was all about being athletic and tough. And I mean, they had boxing gloves at both ends of the court underneath the basket. And when things would go, they would put on, and they were proud of that. And that's how they played. And that was, their, and so, their style. And I think I started 4 men that first year, because that was just who they had, and had to adapt to that. And then when I got to Long Beach State, you can get a premier athlete there. Maybe the skill level wasn't what you wanted it to be, but the athleticism in the Los Angeles area and what was attracted to Long Beach State, we had some great athletes in 17 years, and were able to press, and we call it, 7 seconds was what we'd say, and if you could get a stop and a rebound, we'd give the clock to the players for the first 7 seconds to create space and just go out and run. And now I get to Eastern, and it's almost just like my life, just like this whole, what we're talking about, it's almost full circle. And they're kind of the program that like Gonzaga was 25 years ago, where they're not concerned about your athleticism, they're concerned about your intelligence for the game. And one thing I'll say about David Riley is he's left a great culture there. Yeah, he took all the starters, a majority of the players to Washington State, but he left a great culture for me. These kids are very in tune to the love of the game, like I remember you guys being, my wife Darcy always was really impressed with, like, one of the first recruiting visits she was a part of, and I think Richie and Matt had hosted a kid, and went to breakfast, and said, "How's it going?" They said, "We're not, coach. We don't want him. He doesn't like hoops enough."
Yeah.
And she was like, "Man, these guys really know who they are and what they want to be." And I think Eastern's got a lot of that culture to them, and they've won a title out there for the last 5 years. So we got to rebuild personnel wise, and I think we got to continue getting skilled players like that. But to have that culture is something, as you know, has been the secret sauce for Gonzaga for 25 years. That hasn't left.
Yeah, you mentioned Richie and Matt. Richie hosted me on a recruiting visit when I committed to you.
He was our underground recruiter.
He was recruiting me back in the middle of my sophomore year at University of Washington when I was injured and I was unhappy. It would be, lo and behold, I'd be watching you guys on one of those late Fox Sports games. And then the next day, Richie or Zach Gord or Casey Calvary would give me a call. But usually it was Richie that was kind of starting the recruiting process.
Yeah, well, you guys lived like not very far from each other, and had a lot of pickup games together under your belt.
Yeah, we grew up workout partners, AAU teammates, high school rivals. But where I wanted to go was Richie and Matt, part of that '99 team, and then you look at Axel Dench, Casey Calvary, Mike Nelson, Ryan Floyd, Jeremy Eaton. When you hear those names, what type of memories come flooding back?
Man, it's emotional. Those are the guys.
Yeah.
They're the guys.
Yeah, they completely set the standard for Gonzaga. I remember our group, we didn't want to let those guys down.
Mm-hmm.
And then the guys I would imagine right after me, Blake and Corey, who I played with,
yep.
And then Adam Morrison, they didn't want to let those guys down before them. And so it's almost become like the standard has been set so high, everybody wants to keep picking it up a notch.
And, there's always just been that, we were single, and like I said, Denver got married until 2 weeks after I left for Minnesota, and never really got to say goodbye the right way to those guys. And one of my biggest regrets is this year they had the 25-year reunion. I really looked at trying to find a plane or something, but we actually played on the Thursday, the Saturday that they were there, and I couldn't. I was even looking at that Friday trying to get here and couldn't do it because I've always regretted that. We didn't have the social media, you didn't have the cell phones, and I never really got to say goodbye to the group. I was going back to Minnesota, and I had to basically stay. And I'll never forget, the two people that stand out that, so I tried to come back and circle back, and that's why, it was so hard to be gone for the 25th this year, because they relived so many of those memories, and I made a tape for them. They never, got to show it or whatever. But so it's just always felt like, there's been a disconnect there after that because they are such an integral part of my life and my career, and without them, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. And yet, when I came back, the two people that really stand out were Father Spitzer. I went into his office to thank him, and I couldn't get through it. I was very emotional, crying and saying I was sorry, and he was so, Father Spitzer, he's like, just so spiritual. Hey, the Lord has chosen you to go, you've impacted this place so much, and now it's chosen you to go impact these people in Minnesota, and you need to go, follow your path that he's chosen for you. And just really helped me get through like the guilt of what am I doing leaving, here. And the other one was Casey, because I call Casey.
Casey's a tough guy, but he also has a soft spot.
Oh, but he was just so awesome. He's like, Coach, man, I love you. It doesn't, this doesn't affect anything. He goes, we're going to be fine without you, and that's just Casey,
Yeah.
Being real, but he does have a soft spot. And he, like you were my last recruit, he was my first. He was the first guy that, because they had promised me the job, because Eastern Washington had offered me a job about 2 years before, like in '96.
So it really has come full
Yeah,
circle.
in '96. And so I went out there and looked at it, and it was a tough job. I mean, it's a tough job now. The resources are, are limited, and there's a lot of limitations. But because of the culture, it's so much better now. But back then, it was really tough. And I went in and told Fitz, I said, I think I'm ready to be a head coach, and Eastern's offered me. I think I'm going to do it. And Fitz just, as only Fitz could do. I mean, you dumb. I mean, he started cussing at me. You're not taking that job. That's a graveyard for a coach, and this and that. And I'm like, I know, but I think I can. I got the energy, and I'm brash. I'm 35. I'm ready. And Fitz was tough on us. He was a tough boss. I mean, it was tough sledding. Mark and I and Billy. We had a lot of days where we were ready to get out and everything, and he drove us to be who we are, so he said, I'll tell you what, if I go to Father Coughlin, and we promise you the job in 5 years, will you stay here, and we'll put it in writing that you'll be the next head coach in 5 years. And I'm doing the math, and it's dog years now as an assistant, so that's 35 years in dog years. I'm like, Coach, I can't do that. I go, that's, because I'd already been an assistant for 10, that'd be 15 years, And so he says, well, when do you have to tell him? I said, tomorrow. He said, well, let me talk to Darlene. I'll come back in the morning and talk to you. So he comes back and he says, I talked to Darlene. What if it's 2 years? What if there's 2 years, you're the coach in waiting, and then go? And I said, okay, that would be awesome, But what I didn't realize, and that's back to where we asked about, Casey was so special, is those 2 years now, Fitz didn't go out recruiting. I mean, he's like, hey, you're going to play for you guys. You guys need to go. Yeah. So Mark and I, we're all excited, Well, we just get slammed into recruiting. I mean, everybody's like, you can't go there. He has never been a head coach. They're changing coaches. You don't know how it's going to be, and everything. And so, but as you know, Casey's unique one. Yeah. He's like, no, I'm riding with these guys. These are, I believe in these guys. And so he was always so special because he was the first recruit to say, through all the negative recruiting at Gonzaga at that point, he had Colorado State and some big schools, at that point in time, for Gonzaga to be recruiting against. And I remember I was at the Bulldog golf tournament, and I got a call, out on a golf course, and I think we had one cell phone for the whole department or something, and I borrowed it because he was supposed to, and Casey, he's just like, nope, I'm doing it. I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, I'm coming with you. I'm like, oh my, it was awesome.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because Casey and I were AAU teammates, and I remember you and Coach Few at pretty much every single game that the evaluation periods were open. And back then, it was like the whole month of July was a free-for-all.
Yeah.
So it was like 28 straight days on the road, and I think there's 28 straight days. There's Dan Monson, there's Mark Few, watching Casey Calvary playing. How has that whole evolution of the NCAA and the recruitment calendar and all these crazy transfer rules really changed how you have to manage a roster, both currently, but then looking into the future? Because guys are basically one and done to go to another school almost every year.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, but you have to be careful because, I was out of the business, a month ago for 2 weeks, and those 2 weeks were I was sitting on I wasn't not ready to do that. So if I want to do this, I have to adjust, and that's what coaching is. Like I said, you might have to start 4 men. You might have to start 4. We might have to start 4 off guards next year at Eastern. Whatever we have to do, you have to adjust. And recruiting has been a big adjustment. But they give you the rules, and if you don't, if you want to be an NCAA Division I basketball coach, you abide by the rules. And now the rules are there really are no rules. so you better adjust to it now. Now all these people that were cheating for years, they got an advantage on you because they're
used to it.
They know how to do it, But and one thing at the Eastern level and the Long Beach State level, I think, according to the sources that I've researched, I think there was only 3 schools in the NCAA tournament last year with no NIL, and that was Yale, Long Beach State, and help me out, McGuire, and Stetson.
Okay.
So those 3 schools didn't have NIL, and yet now when I left, my 4 best players went in the portal, and they're going to get a couple $1 million between the 4 of them, because they're out in the market now, and so it's different, and yet it's great. I think these kids, at the core of the role, them benefiting, you look back and. I had a recruit on the Eastern yesterday, and we're telling them, we're talking about this exact same thing. And I have a player, Larry Anderson, played for me. We won 3 straight titles at Long Beach State from 2010 to 13, I think, or whatever. And he was talking about how, when back then the first extra food they would give you was they allowed you to have bagels in your locker room, but you couldn't do cream cheese or you couldn't do peanut butter jelly on them. You couldn't have condiments, and
because it was an extra. I
extra
remember
benefit.
we had there was a rule. We had a strength coach, Mike Chrysler, here, and we could only get 1 scoop of protein in our protein shake. If it went 2, it was a violation. And like Gonzaga has always abided by the rules.
Yeah. And so feeding them has been a great change. And I think it was one of the Villanova players, or Shabazz Napier, maybe it was. Again, is that right, Guire? Sorry, I got my son here.
Well, he was an assistant, or he was at Boise State with Leon Rice, so he's part of that connection.
Yeah,
now too.
and then got his master's with me last year. So, but yeah, when he came out at the Final Four and said, "Hey, all this is great because we get 3 meals here. When we're back home, we don't even get the scholarship doesn't even feed us," and that changed college landscape for him to come out and one single person, and since then. But now, I think they're going to have to figure it out, because I don't know the sustainability is going to be, especially for mid-majors to be able to do that. And, we're working hard to try to figure out ways to compensate kids at Eastern Washington. But the fact of the matter is the resources aren't there. And so as I tell them, you got to come here to develop so you get paid for a job, instead of getting paid for your college career, And so it's still a little bit more organic at this level, but there's schools in the big sky that are paying players, and so if Eastern's going to keep being at the top, they're going to have to get some more resources in those areas too, and they know that, and that's exciting for me to be able to come into a place like that and help them through a stage in college basketball that's changing. And, I think my experience of being at every level and everything, bodes for us to be able to work together on those things.
Well, I've always felt like college players in the revenue generating sports, football and basketball, should be paid something. NCAA dug their feet in the heels in the sand and buried their head, so they didn't want to deal with it. So now we have this complete mess, rather than kind of have a staggered pay scale over the course of years, and what accolades you or your team get, you get bonuses. But they didn't do that. So it's going to take, I think, I'd love to hear your take, a couple more years to really flush out. And I know they're talking about different lawsuits and kind of guidelines, but it's still going to take a couple of years to really kind of figure out how that pay for play is going to work. Do you agree?
I disagree. I don't know that it's ever going to get the genie back into the bottle. I don't know how they're going to, because of the this is the United States of America. It's there's so many rights you have to earn money and to be able to capitalize on your name and your image and your likeness, and I think this is protected by the courts, that I think it's going to be difficult for it to get back, but they've got to try to figure out, if you have an institution like an NCAA, that governing body is supposed to keep everything at an even playing field. And that right now is not happening. So hopefully, you're right, and they can get some of it back under. But I think minimum is going to take a couple of years just to wrap their heads around it. But they want. I mean, I don't know that when's the last time the NCAA has ever won a court battle?
It's been a long time.
I
Yeah.
mean, they're just getting, they're just getting flogged in these court cases. So, like you said, they've just kind of said, okay, well, you guys deal with it. But then my thing is I think it's going to take probably the NCAA has got to start over before these rules can start over, because they've lost all authority, like we're saying. I mean, they used to tell us what we could put on a bagel.
Yeah.
Now they can't tell us, what to pay a player. I mean, there's no, like you said, there's got to be unions where they have control of the pay scale and what they're doing, and so there's got to be ways to do that. But I think they're a long ways from figuring that out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a loaded question. I don't think anybody's got the answer. I think there's a lot of ideas that can get thrown out there, and hopefully at some point a few good ones stick, and we don't lose the beautiful thing that is college basketball.
And let me say this: I don't think I'll be around for it. I love,
at least coaching wise.
Right. I love being at Eastern. I love this new energy and this new opportunity and this new excitement that I have in my life. But I was thinking that when I was at Long Beach State, I'd go till I was 65, and I'm 62 now. Now I might go a little bit longer, but going and what I went through this year, the best thing it did is it taught me that all these things that are happening are crazy, but I love it. Yeah. And I love what I'm doing, and I love coaching, and so if this is how we're doing it, for me to be able to be a Division I basketball coach, then I'm gonna support it and enjoy the ride here, because this is something that I say in interviews whenever I can. The bummer about 1999 and the biggest regret I have of that 1999 team and the run we had into the Elite Eight is it was my second year as a head coach, and at that point I didn't appreciate it enough. I didn't realize how special that was. And so to go through a run like this year, to go to the tournament and get to play Tommy and back in the NCAA tournament, I have enjoyed every moment and soaked it all in, and changing jobs. I've come back to a community that somebody tells you your contract's up, and you know what, we're going in a different direction and you're not wanted, and to come back here and be welcomed like I was, this is awesome. Yeah. And whatever the rules are, whatever, they're not gonna. I'm gonna abide by them, and we're gonna put a great team together that we can at Eastern, and I'm gonna enjoy every minute of it.
So you were at the forefront of Gonzaga's ascension. So you've seen the WCC. You spent time in the Big Ten with Minnesota, Long Beach State in the Big West, and you've played against a ton of Pac-12 schools over the years as a head coach at the different schools. Gonzaga conference realignment continues to pop up. A few years back, it was the Mountain West. Last couple years, it's been the Big 12. If Mark Few asks your take, stay in the WCC, go somewhere else, what are you telling Coach Few?
I would tell Coach Few the same thing Kelvin Sampson's wife, told me when I said Darcy and the four of us were out to dinner and talking about that he had turned down 2 pro jobs that year. This is probably about 3 or 4 years ago, and I asked Kelvin. I said, why? And Karen interrupted and said, because we're not going to mess with Happy. And it really struck to me, and I would tell Mark that, why mess with Happy? You guys, I guess it's more money, and maybe you're and if it's a business decision that they have to do, like the Pac-12 had to do for their business decisions, then you got to do that. But if he has if I was him, why you're dominating what you're doing, you're getting your national exposure, it's all about winning. They're winning. Mm-hmm. Why mess with the secret formula of what's going on there? If things start changing, then maybe they need to change. But right now, it's like people say it's hard to beat a team 3 times. Well, really? You've done it twice now. I mean, I'd much rather be the one that gets to do it. They're the ones that need to make the change. Yeah. Why do you have to change anything? You've just beat them twice. And the same with Gonzaga. I mean, they're not just winning; they're dominating. And obviously St. Mary's has stepped up their game and they're formidable, but it's still Gonzaga's league. It's still the championship of the West Coast Conference tournament, the West Coast Conference League. It still runs through Spokane. I mean, and Randy Bennett, if he put on a lie detector test, he would say it. He has to.
You kept a close eye on the program ever since you left, and this is I want to ask you to build your ultimate Gonzaga player. So going back from your time as an assistant to the head coach to then seeing the program from afar, it might be Casey Calvary's toughness. Name 7 or 8 players that you would want them and a certain characteristic about them to build the perfect basketball player for Gonzaga.
I think the key to what Gonzaga is they've had a cookie cutter of players that all have that what they say he's a zag, and what that means is they're winners. They play hard. They love the game. They're unselfish and they put the team first. And Quentin Hall, I always say, was my quintessential favorite player, because he was 5'9". He didn't have the size. He wasn't. He didn't. Shot was kind of jacked up. But he had the winning, the zag. All he cared about was I'll never forget the first week of school. He came in. He missed class, and I put him up in my Martin Center office up there while they were playing pickup game and made him study. And I come back and he was just fuming. He's like, we're just getting to know each other. We've been there a week. Yeah. He's like, don't you ever do that again. He said, you can do anything to me, run me, but do not take basketball away from me. And I said, well, then you go to class. And he never missed class again. I think, you've got, like you said, you've got these guys with toughness, and then we have guys, the point guard position with you and Blake Stepp and Matt and Quentin and Pargo and the Canadian Pangos. And I mean, how many all-league point guards have they had, through? It's just been a tradition of Gonzaga. It really is point guard you. And to me, I've had, I think in my 17 years, I had about 14 years of an all-league point guard at Long Beach State, and that's something I'm concerned about at Eastern. We've got, that our system is built on a coach on the floor, and they've had so many of those great ones here. And then, the inside players that go unsung, from the Zacharys to the Eaton and Dench for me, and guys that give them Karnowski, they give those guards somebody that gives them an inside presence to be such a guard-dominated league. There were so many great big kids Baptista. I mean, you make me do this. I'm going to leave guys out. I am.
Trust me, I left Adam Morrison out of my
we just left
top 5 on a national TV broadcast, and I'm getting blown up on my phone.
And it's so funny because we haven't mentioned him, and that was the first one that came to mind when you said to me, describe of ultimate, because his cockiness and zag winning and mixed with his ability to score and back it up was, he's probably, if you name one guy, he might be the guy that just has all those intangibles.
Yeah. Well, Coach, I really appreciate the time. I know, you're still getting your feet under you. You're putting together a roster. You finished putting together your staff. Now, after that, I'm sure it's looking at your schedule ahead to next year. So the to-do list keeps growing, and it doesn't end at this time. So I appreciate you carving out an hour, spending it here with us, and we'll stay in touch throughout the course of the year. And hate to say this, but go Eags.
And Zags, we can all. I said we're all in this together. We're not fighting. I want this whole community to have more than one place people they can root for. I mean, there's a lot of Cougar football people that root for Gonzaga basketball. True. I don't know why people can't go to a Gonzaga game at 1 and come out to an Eastern game at 7 and get our community to have 2 great basketball programs.
Absolutely, I agree. Well, again, I appreciate the time. For Gonzaga Nation, a special edition of the Coaches Show, Dan Monson, thanks for joining.